In the heart of the verdant plains of ancient eastern Nigeria, there was a village named Omoko, known for its beauty and abundance. At its helm was King Emeka, a just and honorable ruler. But for many seasons, the village had been stricken by famine, disease, and unending conflict with neighboring tribes. The village elders, after a long and solemn council, approached King Emeka with the only solution left to restore peace, an ancient tradition that the royal family had not invoked for generations. The gods demand a sacrifice, one of the elders spoke gravely. The princess must marry Chinedu, the witch doctor. Chinedu was feared and respected in equal measure. His deep, piercing eyes and imposing figure were legendary. He held power that the villagers could neither understand nor control. The belief was that only through a royal bloodline could the ancestors' anger be appeased and the curse lifted. Princess Amora, the beloved daughter of King Emeka, was a vision of grace. Her spirit was fiery, her heart filled with dreams, but the weight of her people's suffering was too much for her to ignore. She had been betrothed to a neighboring prince, a young warrior she had secretly grown to love. Now, she was faced with an impossible choice: abandon her heart's desire to save her people. Amora had known her fate from a young age. As a princess, she had always understood that her life was not her own. But hearing the decision from her father's lips tore her heart in two. Her love, Okoro, had promised to marry her in the coming moon cycle. They had whispered dreams of ruling side by side, of peace between their villages through their union. Now, those dreams had turned to ashes. She wandered through the baobab trees, the village behind her, as she tried to reconcile her duty with her heart. Her mother, Queen Nia, found her there, tears streaming down her face. "My child," the queen said softly, kneeling beside her daughter. "The path of a princess is never easy, but it is one of strength. Our people need you. You will bring peace to this land." Amora looked up at her mother's face, seeing the sadness there, the quiet resignation that had followed the queen all her life. "But what about love, mother?" she whispered. "What about my dreams?" Queen Nia's voice faltered. "Sometimes, my daughter, love must be sacrificed for the greater good." The day of the marriage was like no other in the village. The skies were overcast, as though the heavens themselves were mourning for the young princess. The villagers gathered, their eyes filled with hope but also pity for the girl they adored. Chinedu stood by the sacred fire, a tall, menacing figure draped in animal skins and adorned with bones. His staff, topped with the skull of a great animal, was a symbol of his dark power. He waited, expressionless, as Amora approached. Amora's heart pounded as she walked toward him, her hand trembling in her mother's grasp. Her wedding attire, made of intricately woven beads and fabrics, felt heavy on her body. She tried to steady her breath, but each step felt like she was walking toward a life she could never return from. The chanting began, low and rhythmic, as the village elders circled around the couple. Amora stood beside Chinedu, her eyes fixed on the ground, her soul screaming for freedom. That night, Amora lay in the witch doctor's hut, the silence pressing down on her like a weight. Chinedu sat across from her, his gaze unwavering. There was no cruelty in his eyes, but neither was there kindness. He was a man bound to his own duty, as much a prisoner of fate as she was. "I will not hurt you," he said, his voice low and rough, like the earth beneath them. "But this union must be consummated, or the curse will not be lifted." Amora turned away, her heart heavy with sorrow. She thought of Okoro, his strong arms around her, his laughter, the way he made her feel alive. And yet, here she was, bound to a man she did not love, all for the sake of her people. As the days passed, Amora found herself living in a strange limbo. Chinedu treated her with respect, though their union was far from one built on love. Despite the forced marriage, Amora had not yet allowed herself to truly open her heart to the witch doctor, holding on to her love for Okoro. However, something inside her was changing. The more time she spent in Chinedu's presence, the more she began to notice strange things happening around her. At night, her dreams were filled with visions of the ancestors, their voices calling out to her. She saw images of her people, the suffering they had endured, and the land that had been taken from them by the curse. One night, as Amora sat by the fire outside their hut, a sudden gust of wind blew through the trees. The fire flared up, and in the flames, she saw a figure, a woman draped in gold, her skin glowing like the sun. Amora recognized her immediately as her great-grandmother, the first queen of Omoko, who had forged a sacred bond with the spirits of the land. "You have the power to save your people, my child," the spirit said, her voice echoing in the wind. "But it will come at a great cost." Despite the visions and her growing understanding of her true power, Amora could not shake the memory of Okoro. He had not yet married another, still holding out hope that he and Amora might one day be together. One evening, under the cover of darkness, Okoro snuck into the village to see her. Amora was torn between her duty to her people and the love that still burned within her heart. They met in secret, in the shadows of the baobab trees where they had once dreamed of a future together. "Run away with me," Okoro pleaded, taking her hands in his. "We can escape this fate. We can be free." Amora's heart ached at his words, but she knew it was impossible. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My people need me. The curse will not be lifted if I leave." Okoro's eyes flashed with anger and desperation. "Do you truly believe in this curse? Or are you just too afraid to take your life into your own hands?" Amora pulled away from him, tears streaming down her face. "It is not fear that holds me back, Okoro. It is love, love for my people, love for the land that has given us everything. I cannot abandon them." The night after Amora's meeting with Okoro, she returned to the witch doctor's hut, her mind swelling with confusion and heartache. Chinedu sensed her turmoil and spoke for the first time about his own pain. "I was not always a witch doctor," Chinedu began, his voice low and steady. "I, too, was once a man in love. But the ancestors chose me, just as they have chosen you." Amora looked at him in surprise. "You were in love?" Chinedu nodded, a distant look in his eyes. "Her name was Dolia. We planned to marry, to live a simple life away from the burdens of the village. But when the curse first began, I was called to this path. I was forced to sacrifice my love for the good of the people." For the first time, Amora saw Chinedu not as the feared witch doctor but as a man who had suffered as she now did. He had made the same impossible choice she was now faced with. "We are bound to our duty," he said quietly. "But that does not mean we cannot find peace." Amora now understood that her marriage to Chinedu was not just about lifting the curse, but about preserving the balance between the living and the spirits of the ancestors. Her dreams of love and freedom had been shattered, but in their place, a new understanding of sacrifice had emerged. One night, as she stood on the edge of the village, looking out at the plains, Amora made her decision. She would embrace her role as both princess and witch doctor, merging the power of the ancestors with the wisdom of her royal lineage. She would not run from her fate, but instead, she would carve a new path, one where love and duty could coexist. With Chinedu by her side and the power of the ancestors coursing through her veins, Amora leads her people into battle. But this is not a battle of swords or spears, it is a battle of the spirit, a test of Amora's newfound powers as both a leader and a witch doctor. In a dramatic confrontation with the enemy chieftain, Amora called upon the ancestors to restore peace. The skies darken, and the ground trembles as the spirits of the land rise to answer her call. In a final, awe-inspiring display of power, Amora brought the conflict to an end, securing peace for her people. After the final battle, peace had settled over Omoko and Amora's people began to rebuild their lives. But in the quiet moments, Amora still felt a disquiet within her. The spirits of the ancestors were not silent, and one night, as she meditated by the sacred fire, they visited her again. This time, it was not her great-grandmother, but a council of ancestors, their forms shifting like shadows in the smoke. "The peace you have secured is fragile," they warned, their voices echoing in the wind. "A deeper threat lies beneath the surface, one that you cannot yet see. It comes from within." The spirits whispered of old betrayals and forgotten pacts. They spoke of hidden powers that could unravel everything Amora had fought for if she wasn't vigilant. But their words were cryptic, leaving her with more questions than answers. Despite the warnings of the ancestors, Amora focused on healing her people. But little did she know that within her own village, forces were conspiring against her. Okoro, heartbroken by Amora's decision to remain with Chinedu, had allowed bitterness to take root in his heart. He began to question whether Amora's powers were truly a gift from the ancestors or something more sinister. His suspicions were fueled by whispers from a jealous elder who had long coveted power for himself. Together, they plotted to undermine Amora's authority, believing that the witch doctor's magic had corrupted her. Okoro, blinded by his own pain, agreed to a terrible plan. He would betray the woman he once loved, in hopes of restoring the village to what he believed was its rightful order. One evening, as Amora and Chinedu prepared for a sacred ceremony, Okoro and the elder approached with an armed group of villagers. In the face of Okoro's rebellion, Chinedu stood beside Amora, his gaze steady. He had foreseen this moment, though he had hoped it would never come. He knew that for peace to endure, he would need to make one final sacrifice. As the villagers closed in, Chinedu stepped forward, raising his staff. "I am the one who carries the burden of this power," he said, his voice echoing with authority. "If you seek to end the curse, then end me. Spare the princess, for she is the future of our people." Amora's eyes widened in horror. "No, Chinedu, I cannot let you do this." Before Amora could stop him, Chinedu unleashed a powerful spell that froze the advancing villagers in place. Then, with a final, sorrowful glance at Amora, he spoke the incantation that would end his own life, releasing the dark magic that had bound the curse to him. With Chinedu's death, the curse that had plagued Omoko for generations was finally broken. The dark clouds that had hovered over the village cleared, and the land began to heal. But the cost of victory weighed heavily on Amora's heart. She had lost not only Chinedu, who had become her guide and protector, but also Okoro, who had once been the love of her life but was now lost to his own bitterness. The village, however, rallied around her, recognizing her strength and leadership. They saw her as the rightful guardian of their people, the one who could bridge the gap between the living and the ancestors. Amora stood before the elders, her head held high. "I will lead our people into a new era of peace and prosperity," she declared, her voice steady. "We must honor the sacrifices that have been made, and we must never forget that true power lies in unity, not division." The villagers knelt before her, swearing their loyalty to the new queen and witch doctor. I believe you enjoyed the tales. Kindly comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and inspiring stories. Goodbye.